No, the title is not clickbait. Genuinely, it is a question. Why would anybody want to move abroad in 2024? Does it still make sense? Is it still worthwhile? Honestly, at this point in time, I can't say that it is worthwhile. At least not for everybody. Although, to be fair, that has never been the case anyway. This is another episode of Not Your Average Globetrotter. I'm Rafael Di Furia, and roll that intro. So, of course, the first thing that I have to think about, and the first question that I would have to ask, why would anybody want to be living in another country, would have to do with the reasoning. I mean, if you're just moving abroad just because you can, I'm not going to say it's a bad reason. I'm not going to say that I've never done it before, but it's worthwhile to think of what is actually behind this massive change that you're about to make in your life. And for many people, it comes down to maybe the cost of living has changed too much in their country. And yes, in certain parts of the world, like for example, specifically the US and the UK, the cost of living has gotten to such a point where the reality of starting out your life as a young person or getting to that point where you are now retiring is not at the point where it would be that you could think about being financially secure and what things will look like over the next 5, 10, 15, 20, 30 years or more. Of course, depending on which end of that scale you're on. But even for my fellow millennials, many of us are thinking, well, is it realistic to even be able to ever buy a home or to have the possibility that it could be a reality in your home country? And for many people, the answer is going to be that it will be impossible. But for many people, it could be possible. Or if they might not be able to in their home country, could they do it in another country? Is the cost of living different enough? And with the cost of living on the rise everywhere, I would argue that while it may be easier in some other parts of the world, with how much things are going up everywhere, is it worthwhile taking a chance on your income not going as far in a couple years from now, or if you're working remotely and getting into a mortgage and your money's coming from a different country, there are going to be certain countries in the world where getting a mortgage is not even going to be possible. And if you can just buy the home outright, this is a different situation. Owning your home, owning that piece of land, or maybe you're moving to a country where you only get to have a long-term rental from the government for 70, 90 years, 100 years, whatever it may be. Also, that's another thing to think about, depending on what your country you're thinking about moving to. You might not be actually allowed to buy property. You might just be getting into a rental, long-term rental from the government that you have rights to this piece of land or this piece of property for X amount of time. It's like a lease of sorts. So if you're thinking about purchasing property that you can hand down to your kids or that your kids might be able to hold on and pass down to their kids or grandkids, is that going to be a reality that you could consider? So this is one thing that I would have to ask. If you are solely thinking about the cost of living, but you have the ability to work from anywhere, why leave your country? Realistically, you're going to need to more than likely learn a new language, which in my opinion isn't a bad thing. I like languages. I think they're fun, but there are times that I'm more motivated to learn and speak, and then there are times that I'm a lot less motivated to learn and speak. And then there's getting used to new systems and customs and culture. These aren't bad things inherently, and these are actually reasons why maybe moving abroad could be a fun thing to do. But there are a lot of hurdles and headaches to jump over when you are looking at a life abroad. So if it is purely just for the reason that you are looking for a cost of living that is much lower, then why not move to the middle of, I don't know, Montana or some random nowheresville that you can still buy a piece of property for who knows how little, and you're going to be in a place where you're going to have some familiarity, even if you're going to be far away from everybody. I mean, okay, if you're going to be far away on the other side of the world from everybody, why do you need to leave your country for that? The US is a large enough of a country that you can move very far away from the people that you know and love, but still be within the same nation and lower your cost of living. And maybe even some states, you can even lower your personal income tax or get rid of them completely, or figure out things in certain states through no corporate tax. These things exist, and these are the things that why some people decide to go to certain countries is because they have better taxation situations than what they might be able to find at home. But if just getting out to some place so that you can lower your cost of living isn't quite enough, and you're looking for a new adventure, then okay. Then that's a reason to start thinking about moving abroad. But why not start looking at lower cost locations in your country? If you're looking to move to a small beach town on the coast of somewhere, in some other part of the world where it's always sunny and always this and always that. I mean, these places exist in your own country if you're coming from the US. If you're coming from the UK, maybe not so much. But then people start thinking about, well, in the US, healthcare is absurdly expensive. And that is true. It is absolutely something that you just can't escape. Well, not within the borders of the US. If you leave the borders of the US, then technically, I guess you could call it escape. But we're not going to argue the semantics. At least I won't argue against the semantics against myself here. This is what happens when you sit in a room with a microphone all by yourself. You start making arguments with yourself, against yourself, for yourself, and by yourself. Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. You never know. I mean, these things just happen, and they can be very exciting, I will definitely admit. Or they can just be flat out boring. You look at the footage back after and you're like, what the heck was I even thinking about? What was I talking about? But that is neither here nor there, and I digress. Before continuing on, I do want to say a huge thank you to those of you who help to make these episodes possible on a monthly basis through rafaeldifuria.com/Patreon, patreon.com/RafaelDiFuria, as well as the one-time donations such as the thanks button, the super thanks button here on YouTube, as well as rafaeldifuria.com/support. But let's get back into the rest of this episode. But I do often hear reasoning from many individuals about the reasons why they're wanting to move abroad or why they have moved abroad, citing the opposite political party that holds the beliefs that are opposite to theirs is to this or to that. I'm going to try to avoid using words like woke, fascist, left, right, this and that, but I have heard the same arguments coming from both sides of the aisle. I've heard the people complaining about, oh, the country is becoming too woke, or as well as I've heard people complaining that, oh, the country is becoming too fascist. Having a project like Not Your Average Globetrotter has actually given me what I would say is very interesting insight into the world around me, as well as the individuals who are thinking about living abroad and the individuals who are already living abroad. It's really fascinating that when you expose yourself, as I have, to the world around me and to the online world, the feedback that I've received, public, private, and even in person and out in the street. But a lot of times when I see people making certain arguments about the thing that they are not crazy about, whatever it may be, whichever direction they may be leaning, they end up moving to a country or to a region or to a specific city where things are maybe more known for being more in the direction of what they're not crazy about. And it's like, well, why would you choose that sort of place for the type of life that you're wanting to lead, for the values that you hold, for the ideals that you have? And also, I need to be clear, I am not arguing for any points or against any points or anybody's beliefs, saying that anybody's right, anybody's wrong. And I'm not saying the left, the right, they're this or the that. Everybody's entitled to their opinion, whether they're right or wrong. That's a different story. And not something that's actually important to this topic at all, because people are allowed to have their reasons why they're happy or unhappy with the location where they live. And they're absolutely as well entitled to have the reasoning to go to the place that they are thinking is right for them. But when I hear from someone, like I've mentioned before many times, that I've heard actually not just one person, but a number of people, oh, I come from this such and such small town in the USA, and I'm really not crazy about X, Y, and Z, maybe that everybody is too much in everybody's business, or a small-mindedness, or this or that or the other, whatever it may be. And then they tell me that they're interested in moving to a small village in Italy, in Germany, in Sweden, in Portugal. I have a difficult time understanding that, because you're kind of trading your small town America for small village Europe. Village town, same thing, different terms, practically speaking. Village life out in the country and small town life out in the country may not differ all that much. And maybe you're going to go to a place where the culture is different enough that actually where you're going, it is more culturally acceptable to stare at people. I mean, that was one thing that actually, when I left the US and some of the places that I've been to, traveled and lived in, that there are parts of the world where it is much more common that people will stare directly at you and not try to hide it. They will make it very, very apparent, as well as judging, judgmental, gossiping. There are certain parts of the world where maybe these aspects of life are more common or less common than what you might be used to. So if you're thinking about that you really are not crazy about X, Y, or Z, you really, really need to take the time to figure out if you are idealizing the place that you are interested in, or is the place that you're looking for actually very much like your home? And yes, we all look for something familiar, especially in a place that's so strange from where we're from. Many of us look to get away from what's familiar, but without realizing it, seek out that familiarity one way or the other, even subconsciously. I would make arguments that this actually can go in various aspects of your life, and even how you relate to people from one person to another, how you relate to your parents, or how you relate to your friends or even loved ones, your partner, whoever it may be. Some of these things end up replaying themselves out in other parts of your life. So the same way that it can happen between your familiar relationships and your friendly relationships can play themselves out also in the place where you live, in the relationship you have with the country that you live in versus the country that you're thinking about living in or moving to or already are now living in. This again is why I so often talk about the lifestyle that you want to lead. What is that lifestyle? What does that look like? How does that compare to what you're doing now? What are the differences, and how do you make those changes? Can you make those changes? Are you not happy with working 10-hour work days at your company because you don't have enough free time and you aren't able to do anything, but you're thinking about now going to work online, doing something else, but then you have to spend those same 10 hours a day just doing something different, but maybe you can allocate them differently, or maybe you have to do them in the same time, but are you doing the same thing in a different place? Are you just recreating the wheel? Are you doing the exact same thing as you were before? Granted, in many parts of the world, if you are doing the same thing that you are doing at home, you could potentially end up living a much better life. I mean, if you're earning a decent income in the US, there are going to be parts of the world where you could move to and live like royalty. There's no doubt about that. Of course, though, like I said at the beginning of this video, how far your money will go at the end of the day has been changing, and it is really becoming a very different story. Like I've said so many times, even about Portugal, people look and they see, oh, wow, so cheap to live in the country, so inexpensive to live in Portugal. But then they get here and they find out, well, you know what? Especially now in 2024, things aren't as low cost as what they were presented to be online. Even Lisbon now is becoming one of the most expensive cities to live in. So even if you think about the minimum salary that a person could make in Portugal and actually how that's going to be going up over the next few years, where is that lining up in comparison to rents? Is that realistic in a city like Lisbon? Is it realistic in a city like Porto? You have to look at some of these things and figure out, where do those salaries line up with what is actually going to be the norm? Yes, you can find places that maybe if you're coming from Manhattan, that, yeah, okay, living in a place like Lisbon, you could get a place that would be much less expensive than what you might be accustomed to. However, if you are looking for the very quote unquote cheap place to live, then that city might not be it for you. And even I would make that argument that Braga is now getting to be at that level where it is a similar problem. In Braga, the cost of a monthly rent has gone so insane, I would have a very difficult time saying that you actually do get the value for your money here. And in a lot of Portugal to begin with, but specifically in Braga, in the past few years, the costs have gone up to a rate that I would say I would have a very difficult time thinking that it is worthwhile making the move if you are looking for that particular detail within the scope of your move. Is it a nice place to live? Yeah, I love it. I mean, I really do enjoy it. Is it perfect? I'm not going to go as far as saying that, but it has all of the basics of what you could need. If you want something else beyond that, you have access to it. It's not like you don't. I mean, if you need to get to an airport, the airport's not that far away. If you want to go to visit another country for the afternoon, yeah, you can drive to Spain and be in another city in Spain in less than an hour. I mean, even you don't even have to drive there. You can just get a bus that'll take you there, or depending on where you are, maybe even just a train. But like I'm saying, you have access to different cultures, different types of lifestyles and different ways of being. But like I keep saying, lifestyle is a very important thing to take into consideration. And if you're looking for a slower lifestyle, can you find that within the borders of your nation? Is there a small town somewhere, maybe on a coast somewhere, a vacation town, where you might be able to find that? Is it possible? Because, I mean, even if you're thinking about, again, like an example of being Portugal, where it's supposed to be sunny all the time and perfect weather all the time, there sure is a lot of rain. And so I would say there are very few spots on this planet that are going to be perfect. I mean, maybe if you're going to be along the equator, you might be able to find a nice hot place all year round. But even there, you can still have rainy seasons, monsoons, and so on. But you have to give and take. For me, maybe living on the equator might be a little bit warmer than what I would personally like, but there are places that exist that don't have the cold weather that maybe you might experience if you're coming from Wisconsin. But if you are from Wisconsin and you are used to that bitter cold that can exist there, will you do okay in very extreme hot weather if you've never lived in that kind of weather before? These are some things that actually I would say many people don't really think about. That, oh my gosh, it's a beautiful country in the sun and this and that, but hold on, wait. How different is it from what you're used to? Is your body physically capable of handling certain types of weather that maybe don't exist where you're from? Again, I'm not saying that you should move abroad or that you shouldn't move abroad, but I'm just saying these are some of the reasons why maybe to think about things from a realistic standpoint that could be worthwhile, maybe rethinking your position as to whether it's worthwhile moving abroad or not. I haven't even gotten into the topic about family and friends and having the people around you and supporting you and the support system to be able to know if something goes wrong that you have people to rely on. When you move abroad, yeah, okay, eventually you can make friends. Maybe you're moving abroad and there are going to be people that you know there already, but to have the same support system like you do in your own country, where you can fend for yourself, you can talk for yourself, you can get all of these things done that you need to do on your own, or at least many of the things. Of course, there are going to be services that you'll need potentially someone to help you along with. I mean, maybe even if we're talking about taxes or registering a business or this or that. Yeah, some places and certain processes you can go through on your own, but there are going to be certain things where having a professional there along with you on your side can definitely help. But if you are having to learn how to walk and talk again from the beginning, that can be very stressful, especially for the first couple of years. I've been in a number of conversations with people that have just moved abroad, and they say, yeah, I just went through this move and been missing my country, and I don't know, does it ever go away? And it's like, no, it doesn't ever totally go away. It just gets easier as time goes on. But the first few years, in my opinion, are the most difficult. And even I've spoken with people that have said, oh my gosh, no, don't tell me this is going to last years. It's like, it's different for everybody. Each person has their own experience of what it's like living on the other side of the world. But genuinely, I would say the first few years are the most difficult. After that, after about probably 5 years, is when I think is really when you start to be able to coast along. Even after a couple of years, and it also depends on your ability and usage of the language where you're going. If you speak the language fluently where you're going, okay, it'll be a different situation for you. But if you've never lived in that country before, then that's a totally different story. Like if you grew up speaking, I don't know, say Brazilian Portuguese perfectly, but you never lived in Brazil, but then you moved to Brazil and you don't know what the systems and how things function there, you're going to have a lot to learn. Or if you speak Spanish perfectly and you decide to move to El Salvador and you've never lived there before, then yeah, okay, there are going to be certain things that you're going to have to get accustomed to. I mean, even when we're talking about one of the biggest reasons why so many people are thinking about leaving the US in regards to safety, some of the problems that we see nowadays are maybe a little bit more new, or what people would think of as new to the US. But in other parts of the world, some of these things have already existed for a while. So if you're thinking about that, there is this one specific problem and you're leaving your country for that problem, like I kind of am repeating what I was talking about earlier in the episode, you have to really do your research to really make sure that that factor is not going to come back and be a problem for you. I mean, there are certain people that are looking for safety and security, but then they move to a place where safety and security are not going to be as top notch as they could be. I'll put it that way. That's jumping into a whole situation that could end really rough for the individual figuring out how they can get their life back to whatever country it is they're from. And this is why I so often talking about making sure that you have a realistic idea of moving abroad to the right place, because I've seen so many people move abroad with unrealistic expectations and then just end up back in their country, and especially ending up back in their country just before things start getting good and just before they get to the good part, before they start actually having fun, before that few years are over, before that maybe first few months are over, during the most difficult times. I have met also people who have been abroad for decades and really didn't work out for them, and they genuinely had a really good reason to go back to their country because it really was not the place for them. Those situations, I really don't blame them. I don't blame someone for seeing and spending the time and really making the effort but finding that it's not the right place for them. But seeing so many people that are just at the beginning, just the most difficult part, it's like you just want to say, come on, give it just a little bit more and you're going to start loving it. But that's how it goes. Anyway, I'm Rafael Di Furia. Thank you so much for joining me for another episode of Not Your Average Globetrotter. Also, thank you to those of you who helped to make this project possible. All the links are down in the more info section below. Stay safe and healthy out there. I'm Rafael Di Furia, and I will see you all next time. Later.